Hi everyone, welcome to today's screencast. My name is Ben Busse. I'm a product manager at DreamFactory. And in today's screencast, we're going to be talking about what DreamFactory is, what it's good for, and how you can get started using it. So let's get started. What is DreamFactory? So DreamFactory is an open source mobile backend that provides REST services for building modern applications. So in the diagram we're showing here, DreamFactory is the software in orange. The platform includes several key things. One is auto-generated APIs. The second is a server-side scripting engine. And then the third thing is a bunch of security controls that cover both the scripting and the APIs. So taken together, it's a full backend for mobile development, desktop apps that use RESTful APIs, Internet of Things, and even server-to-server communication that you might be implementing. So down below you see the way that it connects. So DreamFactory auto-generates REST APIs for a bunch of different data sources. The API is comprehensive, it's customizable, it's secure, and it covers a bunch of bases. It covers all of the popular SQL databases, NoSQL databases, file storage, and things like remote web services that you might need to connect to. Other important features of the platform include server-side scripting, which we'll talk about in the demo today, user management, single sign-on, security features such as record-level access control, interactive live API docs, and client software development kits that you can use to develop the applications that you need to build. So DreamFactory is runtime software. It means that your application makes API calls to DreamFactory. DreamFactory returns JSON or XML back to your apps over SSL. It's an open source package. As we mentioned, you can install it on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, on a server maybe you're running on premises or in the cloud. You can also try it out at dreamfactory.com and just sign up for a free hosted developer account. So I talked a little bit about what DreamFactory is. Now I'm going to talk about how DreamFactory can help you in your own projects. So today when you're building an application, it often looks like this. You're dividing the work between server-side engineering, the back-end, and client-side or the front-end engineering. And process often looks like gathering your functional requirements, determining what data sources your application is going to need to access, building a bunch of custom APIs by hand for the particular app you're building, and then all of the server-side work, implementing business logic, implementing server-side code to protect the data, the user management, the table access, record-level access control. And then, of course, in parallel, the front-end team needs to build a front-end app and then integrate it to the back-end using the API. And it's often iterative, so you're evolving as you go along. And then, of course, at the end, or throughout the project, hopefully, you need to test all of that integration. And all of these steps are really essential, and you need to repeat them each time for every new application that you build. So the end game of all this is that it's really, really complex. You have many applications that you typically need to build, especially if you're an enterprise, and a whole bunch of data sources that these applications need to access. And they need to access it in a secure way and in a way that they're gathering specific pieces of information from the back end, hence the customization. So this results in this kind of n-squared complexity effect where you have custom APIs connecting to custom data sources for custom apps over and over and over again. So the problem with the approach is that it's slow and really, really costly. It's expensive to tackle new development projects. Your new projects take a really long time to develop, test, and ship ultimately. And security is extremely important. It's vital, so it's time consuming to get it right and to test it all. And so what DreamFactory does is it aims to simplify your application development. It does this by providing a pre-built RESTful backend for developing modern apps. And what that means is that you can focus on building your applications, not generating and building a bunch of server-side code. It eliminates that need to repetitively build backend software for each new development project. And this is how it works. You can easily expose data sources RESTfully without manually building REST APIs. You don't have to develop, integrate, test complex layers of server-side business logic. And you don't need to build a whole new user management system and all of those security controls again and again for every new project. So what does this mean for a front-end developer? Well, it means that you can focus on front-end application development, not server-side software. You can easily connect to data sources with a few clicks, and DreamFactory generates a REST API. It's ready to use, and the security is ready to go around the API and all of the data that you might be accessing. This means that you can ship your apps faster using these ready-to-use REST APIs. If you're a backend developer, if you're an API developer, DreamFactory helps in a bunch of ways. It automatically generates and documents a secure, reliable, reusable REST API. It lets you customize the auto-generated APIs using scripting logic, either pre or post-processing on each endpoint. You can integrate with existing security controls, such as LDAP, Active Directory, and OAuth, and so you don't have to re-implement all of these security controls for each API call. You can move the applications between clouds or between your cloud and data center really easily. So the apps that you build with DreamFactory are portable. You can move them between dev, test, and production with ease. Now, if you're an architect and you're thinking about the bigger picture, a few important points to make about DreamFactory. First, DreamFactory lets you govern your security with your own services platform, REST services platform, either running in the cloud or on premises. It's up to you. It lets you accelerate your innovation. So the APIs are reusable. So all of that one-off API development goes away. The APIs can be used over and over again for each new project. This simplifies things a lot because you have a standardized abstraction layer to your data. And the other reason that standardization helps is that it improves application reliability and security enterprise-wide. You're standardizing on a way to access the data across a portfolio of many, many applications. Next, I'll quickly cover how you can start using DreamFactory. So DreamFactory is a free open source software package. You install it. It's an Apache licensed product. It runs on Linux, Windows, and Mac OS X. And you can install it in a bunch of different ways. You can install it on the cloud, in other words, infrastructure as a service, such as Amazon Web Services. You can use one of the platform as a service vendors, such as Red Hat, OpenShift. You can install it in a data center on premises. You can install it locally on your laptop. And if you don't want to install anything, if you don't want to install DreamFactory, you can just sign up and start using it. There's a free hosted developer environment on our website, dreamfactory.com. You can go there and sign up for an account. Once you do decide to install it, there are a bunch of different options. Here are companies that DreamFactory has partnered with on the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service side. So if you work with any of these vendors, it's easy to deploy DreamFactory. You can also, of course, just run it on your operating system of choice, either locally or on premises. All right, so now let's hop into a quick product demo. So in today's demo, I'm going to show you the basics of DreamFactory. I'll be showing you the admin console, which is the browser-based UI for configuring everything in DreamFactory. And I'm really going to cover three areas. So first, I'll show how DreamFactory automatically generates the REST API for a bunch of different data sources like SQL, NoSQL, file storage, email, and push notifications. After that, I'm going to go ahead and hop into a few examples of server-side scripting that allows you to easily customize how your application behaves. And then the last thing I'll show is I'll quickly explain DreamFactory's user management system. This is the way that you secure your backend data. It provides a role-based access control on both your API calls and the scripts, both of which we'll show earlier in the demo. So with that, let's hop right into the demo. Okay, so here we are in the DreamFactory admin console. This is the environment where you configure everything that you need within DreamFactory. So here I'm an administrator. You'll see along the top a bunch of different links. This is where all of the configuration options are, and you set everything up. What we recommend is taking a look at the Home tab first. This provides a couple useful links. One is a quick start guide, which is a guided way to create your first application, whether it's a native mobile app or a web-based application. You just follow the instructions and see how the SDKs work and how you can make some API calls. There are also links to various resources, including community forum, ways of contacting our support team. And then lastly, if you've gone ahead and to dreamfactory.com and signed up for a free developer environment, you can always go to this link and find ways of downloading DreamFactory to your own server once you've given it a try and you want to build some real applications. So a bunch of different links here, including the infrastructure providers, platform as a service, links to Linux, OS X, Windows, and so forth. So go ahead and check that out once you're ready to install it on your own server or your laptop. So next thing I'll show is services. So this is one of the most important things to understand. What do we mean by services? So this is where you set up all of the connections to whatever data your application needs. And once you've established a connection, DreamFactory automatically generates a complete REST API for that particular data source. So it does this basically by securely storing the credentials of your backend data sources and exposing these data sources as a REST interface with hundreds of ready-to-use API calls, which we'll show in a moment. So a quick example of how that works. Here you're looking at the list of services that I've set up. We've got things like email, DynamoDB, Azure Tables, file storage in S3, push notifications with SNS, and I've also hooked up a couple remote web services. So a WordPress plugin that provides a REST API to WordPress, and then Mailgun, which is an email service that has an API. So this is the list of everything that you've set up. Creating a new connection is really trivial. It's very easy. So within just a few minutes, for example, let's say that I want to connect to a remote SQL database, and maybe it's a MySQL database. So what you do is fill out this form. I'll just show you some of the key fields. I won't do it, but you'll get the idea. You just put in a name here. So this is going to be the name of the API, the human readable name. You can give it a different API name for your app if you want. Description, and then basically the credentials. So MySQL, and you put in the host, the database name, the username, and the password. If the host was that, I would put in the DB name and the credentials, and then the connection string is created here, and then you just create this service by clicking the button. And what that does is it creates a new service in the list. And behind the scenes, what that's done in DreamFactory is it's securely stored the credentials for that data source that you added, and it automatically generates a REST API. And that's what we'll look at first. So here are the services I've configured, and then I can hop into the API docs and start browsing and using the live API. So let's look at some examples of that. This is live API documentation for every service that you've set up. So here, DreamFactory actually comes with a built-in MySQL database, which is used for the users and roles. That has its own API. So you can scroll down and you can see basically that this API covers a whole bunch of ground. It covers everything from records, so doing create, read, update, delete operations with any table that's in that database. It lets you get multiple records, post multiple records, singletons. It exposes the schema, and it exposes things like stored procedures and functions. You can also access views and things like that. And that's, for example, what the DB looks like. And then if you look at a NoSQL database, it's essentially a subset of SQL. So the same paradigm. This is DynamoDB. You could set up MongoDB. You could set up CouchDB. There are a bunch of others that are supported. And it looks actually very similar to SQL. It's the exact same paradigm. And you can browse the API. And then you've got things like S3, which is really a subset of NoSQL. So container level, folder level, and file level HTTP operations on all of those. And that's essentially how it works. What's cool about this is it lets you easily interact with the API. I'll give a quick example. So let's say that I imported or created a table called contacts, and I'll show you the paradigm. One thing here is you select whether you want to return JSON or XML. Typically it's JSON, but you have that option. And you can start interacting with the API. Let's put in, let's say, a limit here, and go ahead and I'll go get some child tables. So here what we're doing is specifying a table, a filter, a limit on the records we want returned, and then we've put in star to denote that we want every child record based on foreign key for this particular parent record. And we see a couple things that are useful here. First, we see the path, the URI path, and all of the API parameters that we've added. So here, RESTdb, which is the API name, the table name contacts, and then appended to the API call are the filter. You can do compound and or filters if you want. And the limit, which we specified as 10, and we wanted to bring in all of the related tables, which are basically child tables for that particular object. And that's what it looks like. And then in the response body, we just get an array. We get a record, and we get the filter. In this case, it returned a record with somebody named John Yang, all the data about John Yang, and then some various child data about different ways of contacting this particular contact. So that's basically how it works. And the paradigm is the same for any API call that you make. Again, we didn't build this API. DreamFactory auto-generated it, and it's ready to use. So that's how it works. And then one other thing to point out is the SDKs. So once you've checked out the API, you're happy with it, it's ready to use, you can go ahead and download any of these SDKs. And what these do is they expose the API, or the API is exposed to the SDK, meaning that it's ready to use, and you can immediately make any API call that you've set up on the server with DreamFactory from any of these SDKs. Okay, so next I'm going to turn to scripts. We talked about how to add services, we talked about the API docs, and let's say that we've set a bunch of APIs up and now we want to add some scripting to do something a little more sophisticated. So what is scripting and why would you use it? Any non-trivial app generally requires server-side logic to customize the application behavior. For example, you can think of things like simple things like field validation, or maybe you need to perform a calculation at runtime. Maybe you need to trigger a workflow rule like kick off a push notification when some event occurs. So scripts are basically like webhooks. You can easily add server-side scripts and attach the scripts to any REST API endpoint, either pre-process or post-process any API call. Either request or response. DreamFactory also allows you to write custom scripts, which you can invoke as a REST API call from your application. In the demo today, I'm just quickly going to cover a few examples of event scripts. So if you click on event scripts, you'll see all of the various services that you've set up in the services tab, and you can click any of them to see all of the various API calls. So here I'm going to look at that API that we checked out before, which is db.contacts. And let's do a simple validation example. So here our script ID is db.contacts, and then the verb is post. So before we post to the database via the API, we want to invoke some pre-processing logic in JavaScript. And so to do that, we just write a simple JavaScript routine. This one, for example, is just doing a field validation. So it's looking at the records in an array and going through, looping through those records and checking to see whether first name and last name are actually there. And if they are, it inserts the record. If they're not, it throws an error back to the client who made the API call. So that's a simple example of how you implement a server-side script. So on the response, you can do the same thing. So here, after we successfully inserted a record, we can, for example, kick off a message. And the way we do that is create a message and then post it to this particular path, which is platform.api.post, and you'll notice the pathway is to one of the services that we created in DreamFactory, SNS. So this is SNS push notifications /topic, and then it has a topic ID, and anyone subscribed to that topic will then get this message via the script that is invoked here. Now, you don't have to necessarily call the services that are in DreamFactory. Let's say that I wanted to call some other service over HTTP, I could easily do that from a script. So the important concept is that scripts can invoke services within DreamFactory, they can invoke any remote service, and you can chain them together. So a script can also invoke another script that you've written. So this provides a great deal of flexibility for building, really any data-driven, non-trivial application. In the last part of the demo, I'm going to quickly cover some of the really important security features inside of DreamFactory. So DreamFactory provides a full-blown user management system, and this provides really runtime security on all of the API calls that you've set up, as well as all of the scripts that are accessing any of the data on the back end using the DreamFactory platform. So the way this works is basically with a role-based access control system. It supports single sign-on, secure password hashing, session management, all of the things that you would typically have to build yourself if you were building a homegrown user management system are ready to go without you having to do any of that work. So the way it works is you set up any number of roles, and roles are the mechanism by which you can control access to any of the services, to the API as well as to the scripts that you've already built. And when we talk about roles and users, what we really mean are end users of the applications that you're building. So let's take a quick example of how this works. So let's say that you're building a CRM application and we showed some of the services, like we have a contacts table and some related tables. We showed some of the scripts we built to that contacts table. And now let's say we have some end users. And let's say that the people using the customer relationship management system, let's say it's a mobile application, CRM mobile app, and we want sales reps to log in and use it, but it really should only access part of an existing SQL database that we have. And the way we would do that is we would set up a sales user role, and then we would provide explicit access control to the various tables that we've set up. And the way you do that is you just assign service access. And by doing that, you select any service that you've configured. Here, I'll look at the database. Any table or collection or file or folder, depending on the service, that exists for that service, you explicitly select that. And then you actually specify what kind of access, so what kind of verbs are available to operate on that data for this role. And you can specify API and or script access to the particular table or whatever the service is actually accessing. So this construct is basically table or collection level access control, depending on whether you're using SQL or NoSQL, as well as folder access and so forth if it's a file system. Now, the other thing that's important is the idea of record level access control. And the way you do that is with the idea of advanced filters. So you can specify essentially any logical condition to limit access to records within a particular table or within a particular collection. So in this simple example, let's say that I have an owner ID field on the contacts table, and by putting this operator and value in here, all I'm really saying is only let the person who's authenticated in this session operate on his or her own records. And this prevents me as an end user from clobbering somebody else's records in that particular table. So this type of enforcement is really important, otherwise you're exposing records to people who shouldn't necessarily have access to that data. The other thing that you can do here is you can specify named users for this particular role. So if you want tight administrative control, you can add different users to that particular role. I'll show in a sec a way that you do that with a self-service mechanism. So at runtime, you can use the API to auto-assign a role. So if you want to self-register users within your application, that's really easy to do. And then the last thing is this idea of app assignment. So roles have access to services and they have access to apps. And you can assign more than one app to a particular role. So think of this sales rep role persona. This type of user may have access to the CRM app, they may have access to an address book app, a calendar, and so forth, any of the applications that you've built. And this is the mechanism by which you assign access via the API key, which is the app name, to that particular role. Quickly point out a couple other things. You can have guest users. So if you don't want to require authentication, let's say there's a use case where you want to expose a REST API to anyone publicly, you can use the guest role, and that will open it up publicly to anybody. The other thing that you can do is configure open registration, it's called. So you can click to allow open registration, and then you select a default role for open registration. So the use case here is you have an application, you want to register users, they can put in their email and a password and sign up, and you just use the user API to create that user record and auto-assign that user to a particular role. And DreamFactory also provides some out-of-the-box functionality with respect to sending emails for creating an account and that kind of thing as well, so that you don't have to build all of that. The last thing I'll point out at the very end of the demo here is the idea of apps. So let's quickly review what we did. We set up some services. We looked at the API docs. We learned a bit about the SDKs and how to download them. And we talked about security and the role system and how that all works. Now you're ready to actually build your front-end application. So the way to do that is very simple. To create a new app, you just put in a name. The application name is the API name, so this needs to be passed as a header in your API calls. And you determine whether you would like to host the application files inside of DreamFactory. This is a typical web application type of use case. Or you can just select, for example, a native device. This is the case of you're running your app on a remote client. Say you want to run it on your own server and just access DreamFactory as endpoints. Or let's say you're building an Android or iOS application. The binaries there are obviously packaged on the device. Here you're just accessing endpoints. In that case, very simple. Give it an API name, a human readable name, and a description if you want, and you create it, and that's all you do. Another thing I'll point out quickly is if you want to follow along some of the examples today, you can actually import an application from GitHub, and you can import and export any applications that you build in here in the Packages tab. And what you do there is you just browse for an application. So for example, if I wanted to go and get the address book application, let's say, this actually has all of the contact schema that we talked about. You just click on this, and that will create a GitHub URL, and then you can just bring it in to the applications file storage within DreamFactory and click the import button, and that will bring it in. So hopefully this has been helpful. This is a quick overview of DreamFactory. If you want to learn more, remember the resources here. I will also provide these in the end of the demo as well. Okay, so we covered a lot today in the demo. Hopefully it was helpful and you learned some new things about DreamFactory. So at the end, where can you learn more? So want to provide a few resources that should be helpful. To sign up for a free development environment, if you haven't already tried, just go to our website, dreamfactory.com. On the website, there's a link at the top called Resources, and you can click on that to find all of the various resources, documentation, screencasts, forum. All of those links are provided on that webpage. You can download and install DreamFactory in a bunch of places that I showed today. If you go to dreamfactory.com on the homepage, there's a downloads button. You can click on that. Remember also within the product, if you click on the Home tab, there's a link for downloads there. And this is where you can download it, install it, and get it running in your own environment. There's a GitHub project where all of the source code is. It's an open source Apache project, as I mentioned. So if you go to github.com, DreamFactory Software, the project is DSB Core, and if you click on the wiki link there, there are a lot of docs, in-depth information about the project and a lot of technical information that should be helpful to you if you have questions. There's also a community forum. Go to community.dreamfactory.com. That's also linked from the top of our website. And then lastly, you can check out our blog. We try to show some good demos, some good tutorials, and then also some bigger picture blog posts about where we see APIs and modern application development really happening today. So with that, thank you very much for watching this demo. My name is Ben Busse. You can find me on Twitter at Ben Busse, and my email is benbusse@dreamfactory.com. Thank you.